Discourse. I'm Tyler Frater alongside Richard De La Cruz.
Hello.
And Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater. It is Monday, January 20th, 2024. Go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/gamingdiscourse, patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. You can support us for $247, $10. Get your name in the video credits, early access to our videos, access to our Discord server, and more. Lots of news this week.
Yeah.
The Switch 2. We have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
We have exclusive visuals on the Switch 2, as has everybody else.
I did a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
So we'll break down that. We'll break down other stuff. The past couple weeks have been like a vacation type thing for me. So I played a crap ton of games. I finished 2. I had forgotten how good it feels to finish a video game. Mm-hmm. That feels really nice to be able to...
Sounds nice.
Close the door and be like, heck yeah. But yeah, so I have a couple things that I would like to talk about. Is there anything you would like to talk about?
Not necessarily.
No.
I mean, the only thing I could maybe mention is that I started up Wuthering Waves again because it came out on PS5. Finally, okay. This was the another free to play. You know what? I'm going to call it a Genshin-like, I guess. Because they all have the same structure, and the fandoms argue with each other all the time. But if you ever like played Genshin Impact and started it out, played any other game that came after it, it's all set up exactly the same. Several different currencies, like the wheel to access your menus is the same. What they call their currencies are, you kind of get the gist of everything. But I tried to play it last year on my PC, and my PC is just not good enough to run it reliably. I could have trudged through it, but I didn't want to. It kind of soured the experience. But I waited for the PS5 release, and I started playing it again. And it is a lot of fun, and I think it has some really neat, really neat specific things about it that kind of grabbed me a little more. The fighting system is very slightly more in depth than like something like Genshin Impact. You do have more combos that you can perform, and you have a certain type of in these games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Impact and stuff like that. You have artifacts or things that you can equip onto your characters, and they're kind of just your stat bonuses. They don't really do anything besides that. However, in Wuthering Waves, kind of have this Pokemon-esque system to where enemies out on the field, if you defeat them, they will leave their kind of echo behind, their like shadow, and you can grab it and it becomes a part of you. That's what gives you your buffs. And there's 4 or 5 of them. 3 of them aren't really, they're just kind of extra stat bonuses, but the 4th one is generally your main one. And while you're fighting and performing combos, you can hit a button and call that main creature out to perform like a special move for you. Like you kind of turn into the creature and then do a special move and then go back to your combos. So it's a lot more flashy. It's a lot more fun. And I think this is where the downside comes for something like Genshin Impact that I've been playing, because it's been out since 2020 and we are now 5 years. Was it 2020? Yeah, anyways, 5 years.
It does seem very... 2020 does not seem that far away.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just the last half decade. Yeah. It's amazing to me that people were freshmen and have graduated high school.
That is very weird.
And they're like trying to figure out what to do for college now at this point.
I was born in the 1900s. So.
Me too.
But this is where, when I look at a game like Genshin Impact, I get kind of sad because that game has not grown out of its initial feel and its initial look. It kind of looks like it could be better. It kind of characters that came out in 2020 compared to characters that have released within the last couple months are a complete night and day difference. Like the newer characters have really neat specials that are they're very flashy. They have cool maneuvers, but the original characters, who a lot of people still love, are very basic, very boring, and there's nothing to update either their textures or their character models or their abilities, which is unfortunate. But something like, Wuthering Waves that came out recently, the world is a lot more interesting to run around and discover what's going on there. The abilities are more interesting. The characters are more interesting. The creatures are more interesting. I would probably say the biggest downside to that game is it is very Chinese, and I mean that in the sense that the location names, references to certain objects, items are all very not that you can't grasp them eventually. I hate that I'm going to use this word. It's obviously very foreign. Like,
oh, sure.
Like it is, you can get used to them. It's just tough to, like, when you first start playing it, it feels like a lot of information. It feels like you have a very, very tough time trying to keep up and follow with it. And I think that if you aren't able to, you can fall out real quickly because of that. And I think that's the worst part of it. But
I think one of the like underrated aspects of learning a different language is that not everybody like part of American English is not just the words that we use, but also like the cadence of how we speak.
Yeah.
And then like the turn of phrases and stuff. Like I remember when I went to France, how if we say hi to each other, how many different ways can you say hi? Hey, how you doing? How's it going? What's up? Sup? Like there's a million different ways.
No,
yeah, exactly.
Stuff
right?
like that. Yeah.
All the different ways. In France, it's, I don't know, I'm sure there's different ways.
Yeah.
But everywhere I go, it's bonjour. That was the only, and it wasn't just because I was a tourist saying it. That's the only thing I heard everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know. It's cool to learn different languages and play games in different languages because you don't just like see other words and stuff, but it's also like different ways of speaking, which is interesting.
And it's not, when I say it's a detriment to the game, I don't mean it in like it shouldn't be that way. Obviously, it's just for those who may be interested. It is a very sharp hump climb and eventually get over. But that's what I've been doing. Besides that and Marvel Rivals, I haven't started anything. Although I have my eye on a couple of games I may give a shot to soon.
Awesome, cool. So I finished. I played Jusant because I have Xbox Game Pass for another month.
Nice.
Jusant is by Don't Nod, a climbing narrative game where you climb up a giant mountain thing. I won't say a whole lot about it except that it was very good. It's not very long, so I'd recommend playing it. The mechanics are really easy to pick up, but they're deep enough that you can have some fun with them. It's kind of what you expect. You have stamina, you climb, you have to reestablish yourself so that you don't fall. But other than that, a really solid, really somber, but really like heartfelt, nice story about a lost, essentially a civilization that has lost, or that has been lost. I finished Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I will probably the few I have talked about how much I love that game, but probably the few things I would say negatively about it are I feel like after a while you've kind of seen all the mechanics it kind of has for you, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So once you get, there are 3 open maps. There are 3 big maps. And between those big maps are shorter story sections that are more linear. But you can return to all of them as far as I know to get like collectibles and stuff. You can definitely return to like the big maps and you get side quests and things.
Okay, cool.
You don't have to, you can continue on with the story, but once you leave, so like the second area is Egypt. Once you leave Egypt, you can return to do the side quests. You just have to do the main quests to get through everything. But yeah, like after a while, because there is fast travel in the game, but the only way to fast travel is to find a signpost and then go to a different signpost. So sometimes signposts are pretty far apart. So there's a lot of like, especially in Egypt, there's a lot of like sprinting between signposts or sprinting to signposts to get different places. Also, when you get to an open world level the first time, it follows sort of a similar structure where you only have your Indiana Jones clothes and eventually you find your either clothes to blend in with other people, or you'll find a uniform to sneak in, like a German uniform or an Italian soldier's uniform to like sneak into their camp, and they won't detect you unless an officer sees you, and you have to get away from the officer before he decides to inspect you. But it's like the third time around, you kind of just I don't know. When I got to the third big level, again, you have to find uniforms to blend in.
Okay,
that or they weren't there, because I didn't even look for them. I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna go. Because it took so long.
I'm Indiana Jones. I'm here.
I'm just gonna mainline. But mainlining the story was fantastic. The other sort of negative-ish thing I'll say is that I think they took a pretty cool concept, the Great Circle, and lots of mystery and cool locales. And I won't. It's hard to spoil. It's hard not to spoil it, but I don't think it's kind of weird. It essentially turns into Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay.
That's basically what the game becomes, and you can kind of see it like a mile away. You're like, oh, don't get me wrong, the ending is amazing. Yeah. It's awesome. It's perfect. It's a little like The Force Awakens, where it's like a really good movie that sort of just redid a different, you know?
Yeah, and isn't that the downside to having a movie and a series be so good, nothing can ever be as good as it? You just have to copy that. Yeah.
I feel like they could have. I feel like there's stuff you could have done there. They try to deconstruct Indiana Jones a little bit, which I think maybe the newer movies have done. I don't really know. I haven't seen them. Well, I haven't seen the latest one. But with that said, at the end, I put my arms into the air because I just loved the ending so much.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know if you said you may plan on playing it when it comes to...
I do, yeah, when it comes to PS5.
Tony Todd is just so good in it. Yeah. And I don't know if it's his last credit or not, but like his character is just so cool and his performance is just so good. And he and the entire cast just has fantastic chemistry, and Tony Todd's character, I don't know, it's hard. I don't want to spoil things, but like just where you see him first to other things that happen, that part is actually really unique and really cool, and how it ends. And it also ends in a way that is somewhat fitting. I don't know. So I'll let you play it, and once you finish. But yeah. The ending was perfect. I enjoyed the hell out of it. What I'll say is that if you hit a wall and you suddenly don't feel like doing side quests or getting all the collectibles or whatever, just mainline it. It's fine.
Okay.
Because the mainline stuff's fantastic. The side quests are cool. Some of them are really cool. But like especially in Egypt, it's really big. There's lots of traversing you have to do. And yeah, I kind of got into I had to tell myself, wait, I don't need to collect all these things. It's okay. And I went right back to the story, and I was like, oh my God, this is great.
Oh, so cool. Good.
Just remember that you don't have to. And as far as I know, there is a collectible thing that you can get to unlock, I think, a secret ending. But other than that, if you don't complete a side quest in the first area, you're not going to, somebody's not going to get shot in Act 3 or anything. You don't have to worry about any of that. And then other than those things, I played a lot more Dread Delusion, which continues to be excellent. I hop in and out of Dread Delusion because it's not an easy game to get into. It's made to play old. So it's like there is no fast travel. You have to run everywhere.
Yeah, okay.
There is fast travel, but you have to find these like teleporters, which you have to find, and then they teleport you to specific spots on the map. Mm-hmm. So other than that, there's no like fast travel. As you're out exploring, your stamina depletes ever so slightly. So when you sprint or in combat, your stamina gets low and low to the point where you eventually have to sleep to replenish it. That or drink a stamina potion, which means if you're drinking stamina potions, you have to make stamina potions. You can only make stamina potions at stamina potion crafting tables, and those are not marked on your map. You kind of just have to remember where they are. So there's a lot of like design choices that they made to mimic older style games where a lot of information you just kind of had to remember or know or memorize or whatever, which I'm okay with because the writing is fantastic. I want to tell you about one quest that kind of blew my mind. So I spoke about Dread Delusion my favorite in our favorite games of 2024.
Yes.
But and I kind of explained how in Dread Delusion, gods are like forces of nature. They're not like omnipotent. They're not all powerful. And also, not all gods are like evil or good. Some are just kind of like they're forces of nature. There's a god of disease, but he also brings life. He just does both things. So he's not malicious. He's as neutral as a storm, right?
Okay.
Like a storm isn't evil. A storm is just weather. So the gods are very complex in how they're portrayed and stuff. But I was exploring around a mountain, and I kept running into these bandits, normal bandits that you find elsewhere in the world. But these bandits had giant pink crystals like growing out of their heads. I'm gonna spoil this quest.
That's
I'm
fine.
sorry. So I was like, what's going on with these guys? Why do these guys have crystals? So eventually I find a mine right around where all these guys with crystals growing out of their heads were. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go on this mine and check it out. So I start going down the mine, descending, and there's more bandits in there with crystals in their head.
Are they getting worse, or
and
are they just,
yeah, and there's like crystal. There's the same crystal is like growing on the walls. So I'm like, okay, so they're like getting infected. What's going on?
Right.
So I get deeper, and I run into a normal looking person, not a bandit, just a normal person who has a crystal growing out of their head. And I talk with them, and they say that at the bottom of this cave, there's this god that is just coming into their power. And this god is infecting people and giving them all a singular purpose. So this god is turning all these people into essentially a hive mind. So it's like, okay, so there's a god down here, and I have to keep going. So to see what's going on. So I keep going. Eventually, you run into an agent of the Inquisition. The Inquisition, I explained it a little bit, is sort of opposed to the gods. They send out inquisitors to kill cults and to kill gods before they get powerful. So the Inquisition already sent a team in here to kill the god, but that team had been wiped out by the cultists, except for one guy. So the Inquisitor was like, hey, I'm too beat up to fight, but take this item. Once you find the god, if you show the god this item, it'll kill the god and it'll be over. So you're like, okay. So you keep going further and further down, and eventually you meet the god, and the god doesn't, it's not like it's like a giant crystal statue.
Yeah.
And it was carved by one of the cultists, and the cultists sort of describe it as the god communicated to me how it wanted me to shape its image in the crystal, right? So you get the option of either killing the god or essentially committing yourself to the god. A little bit more context. This quest happens in a place called the Endless Realm, which is there's 3 nations in Dread Delusion. But the Endless Realm is a place where all the people are immortal, but they're decaying. So think of like a zombie that sort of feels the pain of decay and all that stuff.
It's also kind of like, I'm sorry to bring it back.
No.
Honkai Star Rail has a race that basically is immortal, but they begin to go crazy. It's similar to that.
So anyway, so in this Endless Realm, these people are sort of hoping to die, but they can't die. So there's like different beliefs about eventually a god will come by that'll take us away and finally end our lives, because we're immortal and we can't die, but we're also decaying and bored, and we live in their countryside has some kind of like rot in it. So it's not like immortal like the elves in Lord of the Rings. It's very depressing immortal.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the people that this god is infecting are the endless people. And so this endless guy is like, no. This endless person is giving me purpose that I haven't felt since like 100 years ago. Because it's finally, I used to just be pointless. I was just like, I had endless life, but nothing to do. And this God is giving me like a reason to live. And this God's plan is to do this for all the endless. You shouldn't kill them. And at the same time, I'm like, but does this God plan to infect the entire world?
Where does it stop?
Or does it just the end? But you don't have the answer to that question. So you kind of just have to, and that's Dread Delusion is so well written because none of its answers are straight.
Yeah,
I told you about the plague god. The plague god's gonna spread disease throughout the land, but also gonna help the crops grow. It's like, well, what do you even do there? Or you could kill the plague god, but then that means no crops are gonna grow. So it's like they do such a good job writing these. What do you think? There's no good side, no bad side.
Classic trolley problem.
Yeah, exactly. except like on either side of the trolley, you really have no idea what could happen. But so I decided to commit myself to the god because I was like, I could kill the god, and that may be safer, but it may be more interesting to commit myself to the god and just see what happens. It's a video game after all.
Mm-hmm.
So I committed myself to the god. That Inquisition agent, I told him, I was like, oh yeah, don't worry, I'll kill this bitch. Don't worry. Got down there.
Got it.
Yeah, got down there and I was like, I'm yours, you know.
This is pretty rad.
Yeah. So I don't know what's gonna happen there, but yeah, Dread Delusion is.
Did it give you like some sort of affliction at all?
It gave me a power where to save the game you have to walk up to these crystals.
Mm-hmm.
You press A on the crystal, you save your game, and that's where you can the last crystal that you activated, you can fast travel back to it. So it's like your one activated fast travel spot. But usually when you activate it, it just saves your game. But now when I activate it, it refills my health and my magicka, which is actually pretty nice. Because
what cost?
Right? Because if you find one out in the open world, then it's like, oh, I can refresh my health and magicka. I don't have to spend potions or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that is actually pretty nice. But so yeah, I don't know. I was playing that, and it's just one of those moments in a video game where I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
What is this thing? Let me poke around, and I just ended up getting engrossed for like an hour and a half in this really simple, interesting little storyline. And yeah,
I've had that on my wish list because I do have an affinity for low poly, type games, and that one and another one I can't remember the name to, but. The more you talk about it, the more it's very, very interesting. Something I want to give a shot whenever I can because that sounds really awesome.
The combat's pretty rudimentary.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's not that hard, but it is hard in the sense that, you know, you'll meet a guy and he's like, hey, I've got a treasure chest. It's northwest of this rock, south of this rock, and north of that tree. See you later. And you're like, oh shit, what? And you go to your quest log and it'll just say, it's northwest of this log, south of this log, north of that rock. And you just have to do your best to follow it. There are guides online that help with that stuff.
Right.
But even then, it's like there are no quest markers. Nothing is easy in the game. So there's the draw. I think the trade-off to that though is that it becomes really deep. Because then it's really about exploration. It's really about, now it actually helps if you see a tower, climb the tower real quick, look out the window, and like, what do you see?
Survey.
Do I see the thing that I'm kind of looking for?
Any landmarks or something?
Yeah. So in removing all those player bumpers, it creates dynamics that you don't see a whole lot nowadays. But it can get frustrating because you just get lost and you have no idea where you're going. And it's just like, what the hell is going on? But
that sounds really cool.
But yeah, that Dread. Yeah, I wanted to share it, that story because I hop in and out of my mood, like when I want to play it. But yeah, recently I've been in like, you know what, I'm down for a little inconvenient.
Well, that's
late 90s RPG here. So.
That's also the the drawback to it is if you want to play something like Dread Delusion, I'd assume you would have to really make sure that your mind is settled into realizing like the rudimentary combat, the less hand holding, no voice acting, I assume.
No, it's all text. It's all text.
Yeah, because
the writing's really good though. The writing's really good.
Right. What you're because what you're talking about reminds me of a game that's not very good, but it loves to be played at GDQ, but it's called a Hide Light, Super Hide Light.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's very much Hide Light is those types of games. Just kind of go out and figure out what you need to do, and that's very cool.
What I would compare Dread Delusion to is like when people talk about in literature, like about like War and Peace or something, like meaty books that are like difficult to read, that there's a lot going on, you know, Kafka, whatever. I'm not the smartest man on earth, but the point I'm trying to make here is I think Dread Delusion's a little like, its gameplay is a little like that because it's not player friendly. It's not going to hold your hand at all. It wants you to discover things. It wants you to take notes or remember things. But in that, I think it creates an experience that doesn't exist today and mimics things back in the day. But today it's sort of trying to be a style all on its own. But anyway, so yeah. And if that sounds good, I would highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah.
And giving it your best shot. But yeah, is there anything else you say before we?
Did you buy the Castlevania collection?
I did not. I'm sorry.
It's $3.
I know. Is it still $3.99?
Okay. I don't know, but I'm not gonna sit here and force you to do it.
I started playing Hollow Knight, which is another thing. I'm not gonna talk about it right now.
Yeah,
but
don't worry about it. But that one's
well,
good.
You know what? There was some Hollow Knight conspiracy theories that were disproven, so we'll play the ad and we'll talk Switch 2. Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server. Okay, so did you see the Switch 2 trailer?
Yeah.
All right,
of course.
What are your thoughts?
I'm
do
excited.
You think? Let's turn this minute and a half trailer where we see the Switch 2 into a 6-hour-long conversation. Go.
I can do my best, but probably be disappointing for some people. I think I am a little more positive on it than I think the internet is. I think it did a good job of kind of showing, although the slight differences of the new Switch, what it's going to be like improving in a sense, because we already are aware that Joy-Cons have always been small, and that, I don't want to say locks out people, but it's not comfortable for a large group of people. So seeing that the Joy-Cons are, assumingly bigger, the buttons, the LNR buttons are bigger, the sides of it kind of come out a little more, is very interesting. I know a lot of people are really focusing on the way the controllers were like moving on the table. I don't know if you saw people talking about that, but
no.
The way that the Joy-Cons were moving on the table, kind of like drifting around and stuff. For some reason, people are getting this idea that it's going to have some sort of like IR mouse like type of like thing going on.
I know the scene you're talking about now.
Yeah. Which I mean, I don't buy that. I don't know why. Like, I know why I don't buy it, because it's just a commercial. Like, and I just feel like that was the cool thing to do with those
stylistic
two.
way of showing off.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the bezel, I'm very glad that the screen is bigger and the bezel is smaller, so we get more screen space. But all in all, it kind of, I think Switch 2 or Nintendo just simply delivered on more of what people wanted in the first place.
Yeah.
Which was just, I want the Switch, but more powerful. We assume it's going to be more powerful.
Yeah, and that's the big one of the big question marks.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that they brought back sort of the color scheme, but only for the like the plastic insert on one of the controllers and the space underneath the analog sticks. I always thought that was kind of a neat thing and a very Nintendo thing with the different colored
controller Joy-Cons.
Yeah, Joy-Cons. I assume that's probably something they'll do down the line. I just found it interesting that they went with sort of that all black look. I think it makes I have a lot of questions that Nintendo knows that everybody has.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll just have to wait. It's good to see that backwards compatibility, both physical and digital.
Digital, yes.
Is confirmed. So that's nice. I am curious because they said not all games. I don't know. That could be there are certain cases out there where they can't have backwards compat for like a weird reason, whatever.
Yeah.
But in the back of my head, I'm just like, if Tears of the Kingdom is not backwards compatible,
that would be insane.
I'm going to freak out.
That's a bit ridiculous. I do think that Nintendo does have, obviously there's a lot of questions, but if people don't know how words work, this was simply a reveal trailer.
Yeah.
First look trailer. This was not a when we got the Switch, the original Switch revealed to us. It was an hour and a half long presentation, or like an hour or 40-minute presentation on stage in front of live people.
Yeah.
They did this middle of the night. Dropped the trailer middle of the night, Japan time. So this was simply just, I think this trailer was always going to be shown. I don't think it's a response to any leaks or anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also I don't know. It does feel like people compared it to like an Apple type thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I could see that comparison. But also, it just feels like the smart, obvious thing to do, because this is what everyone wants. This is what everyone has been expecting.
Yes.
This is what makes sense. I know, Nintendo likes to be radically different with like every console that they've always been, but this just seemed like they've with the success of the Switch and being able to take your console, mobile or whatever. I think they carved out like a niche that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it competes with the Steam Deck. The PC handheld space, I think, is a different monster. And it also doesn't have Nintendo games.
Right.
Yes, you can emulate them, but not on like a mass market, casual market level.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a very Nintendo way of like revealing the Switch 2, but I also think it does make sense because it is the thing that everybody was expecting. So it wouldn't have the same weight as like a big hour-long press conference because it's not a totally brand new thing. It's just a new iteration of something that's already there. But with that comes questions like, okay, so what does Nintendo do to bring people over from Switch, right?
Yeah.
Because there are a ton of people that are playing Fortnite on Switch or playing Minecraft on Switch,
Mm-hmm.
or playing games on Switch that a year after Switch 2 comes out, they'll still run perfectly fine on the Switch. Stardew Valley. What's the game with all the animals? Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing. All right. So it's like, how do you, what do you do? And because unless this is like a really gigantic, because when you go from PS2 to PS3, that's a huge technological leap. When you go from PS3, PS4, it's kind of the same thing, right? Go from Switch to Switch 2, we don't know how much of a technological leap it's going to be. And it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be relative to like the console jumps of Xboxes and PlayStations in the past. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because Switch is already, because Nintendo already makes sort of, cheaper, less powerful hardware, and that's kind of their game. So they're not going to have like this generational, huge, gigantic machine that's going to run, 4K or anything like that. So it's like, will people hop over to Switch? In my mind, it feels like yes, because it's a new thing.
Yeah.
And people are just always ready to buy new things. So I feel like yes, but for some reason, I don't know. I'm curious about the adoption rate. There's like some little voice in my head that's like, but what if there's a bunch of people out there that are like, I'll wait a year to get the Switch 2 because my first Switch is perfectly fine. But maybe I'm crazy for thinking there are people like that. Maybe nobody's like that. I don't know.
No, there's a lot of people that like. I mean, I'm still selling Switches, at the stores.
And that's what I mean.
And first time owner for Switches, and I think that's cool. And I still also have people coming in like buying 360s for the first time. And it's like, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I know it's silly buying a 360, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, you're buying one of the greatest consoles ever made. All the games are like $4 each. Like, it's a smart move, we can never like say if a console is going to be successful or not. I think there are three things that are floating around. Well, there's one statement I want to make, but two other things that are floating around that I think are really depending on it. First, Mario Kart 9.
Oh, yeah. That was the thing I neglected to mention.
Yeah.
Has that been confirmed? Or is everybody just looking at that and saying this is definitely Mario Kart 9?
It hasn't been confirmed, but everybody's looking at it like definitely Mario Kart 9 because this level is not a Mario Kart level.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But sorry, not to cut you off there. Three things. Mario Kart 9.
Yeah, that level's not a Mario Kart level. Donkey Kong looks completely different. He has a redesign. 24 player, like people are noticing that it's like 24 player startup, which is great. Mario Kart 9 is going to help. Switch definitely got to where it did because of 2 games, and that was first and foremost Breath of the Wild. And then secondly, I think it was Mario Kart 8.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think the one thing that Nintendo needs to do and not do is first go back to some of your best loved games on the Switch and give some patches to them, like up-res them, performance, whatever you need to do to give it just a little bit of a spit shine. Tears needs it. Breath of the Wild needs it. And there's one more that needs it. Can't remember. There's a lot of games that need it. The not to do, don't make Mario Kart 9 cross-platform. I don't think that they're going to do that, but that would be a big shot in the foot if they did. Because looking at the footage of Mario Kart 9, it's Mario Kart. Like, I can look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's absolutely Mario Kart. But if I like squint, and granted they haven't shown it to us in earnest, it's just on a TV in a TV, you know. But if I squint, I go, oh yeah, it does look a little better. It does, you know. But Mario games, Zelda games, they have art styles to them, and they kind of stick to that. So it's not how good it looks or anything. And the third thing is all of the rumors of the supposed leaked games that are going to be coming to the Switch. If those are true, then we kind of have an idea of how powerful this console is, which I think is kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
and people
do you think
forget how big of a deal it is.
Do you think I'm wrong when I say that it? Because I have heard speculation. Like, obviously, the PS4 Pro thing seems to be in the no camp. Like, it's not going to be that powerful from all of the speculation that I've heard. But a PS4, that seems to be within the realm of possibility.
Yes. I'm
speaking, like, Digital Foundry had a podcast on it, and they kind of broke it down. So I'll defer all the tech stuff to them.
Sure. That's good. That's a very safe bet.
Yeah, but I don't know. Do you think my analysis is wrong that from Switch to Switch 2, that tech probably won't be, that jump won't be anything like PS2 to PS3 or something like that?
Oh, I think you are correct.
Okay.
Because I mean, it's a discussion that has been growing in the last half year, but diminishing returns when it comes to graphics and games. We're never going to, and we talked about it before, we're never going to see a big graphical jump like we did with PS1 to PS2, or even PS2 to PS3 360. Like, we're just not going to see it because we're already at that point where it looks as good as it's going to get. And someone did a comparison photo between a PS4 game and a PS5 game. Can't remember which one it was. And besides some, slightly better textures and reflections and stuff, I couldn't. It still looks incredible.
It's the frame rate that really makes the difference. Yeah, like Ghost of Tsushima runs incredible on the PS4. It looks incredible, but it's the frame rate that really.
And that game, along with Red Dead 2, which is one of the games that's supposedly coming to Switch 2, those are the 2 games I would point to be like, if you don't think that having this handheld like isn't incredible, then you're crazy. Like, you are insane for thinking that.
Yeah. Let's see what else. The other question I have is saves, because now I assume that would maybe be tethered to Nintendo Online or something with, like it is now, cloud saves.
It's a half and half thing, yeah.
But like, if they made it if they make it backwards compatible and it's digital and physical, then it's like, say I want to pick up my Tears of the Kingdom save on the Switch 2, which has been the plan for a year now. because I played a lot of it on the Switch and I was having fun, but I was like, man, it would be great if this was running just a little bit better. And then it was like, maybe I can wait for Switch 2. So it's like, but I want to take my save over. So how is that going to work? Am I really going to have to pay Nintendo Online the day I get a Switch 2 to like toss over some saves or something like that? I don't know. We'll have to see about that. But it's going to be fascinating to see how the market reacts, because it's a new console launch, which is exciting. Yes, it's like a new piece of video game history. But it's also something that, like, I don't know. But so it's been in the 2000s. It's been GameCube, Wii U, which was kind of like a Wii but not, and then Switch, and now Switch 2. So the Switch and the Switch 2 are probably the most similar consoles. The Wii and the Wii U they had like no, they weren't similar at all. The Wii was stand up. The Wii U was like a lay down thing, wasn't it?
They both could do either or.
Okay,
but the way
I never had a Wii U, but a lot of other people. But even before the GameCube, like before that, there was the N64, and then before that, was there one between that and the NES? No.
No. Well, very technically, the Virtual Boy.
Oh,
okay.
But
that's a very technical.
Okay.
Edition.
But like Nintendo hasn't done like a sequel console. It doesn't feel like.
I mean Super Nintendo.
Oh wait.
Nintendo, Super Nintendo.
Yeah. No, you're right. All right. So since then. Yeah. I don't know.
Game Boy Color.
Okay, but handhelds don't count.
Game Boy. Hey, what is this? What is this, buddy? no, this is a hybrid thing. This is a hybrid. This is.
You're correct. You're correct.
The Switch is just a fully realized Wii U.
Yes.
But even then, I think that, or something I wanted to point out with, because we got, we still have to wait for April, which I'm totally stoked for April to see what they're going to show off with this console and the games and everything. But regarding what it can do, there's two things that I was musing with my coworker about. And one is the extra button that's on the right Joy-Con. And I remember on the Wii U, at the press of a button, which was, I think, the select button, if you were playing a game on the TV and you press the select button, it would just go to your pad.
Oh, interesting.
So, like, if mom came home and she wanted to watch whatever, hit the button, it goes to your pad, and then the TV gets freed up for her. If they brought back that tech to quickly switch between docked and undocked, I think that would be rad.
Wait, well, so how would that work then?
Well, I would probably imagine that.
How would that work?
Actually, you know what? That wouldn't work. Thanks for poking a hole in that.
Unless
I thought I had an idea of how it worked, but my whole thing fell apart when I realized, you could just.
Unless you would have to have like a cable run, like some kind of weird cable situation running from. Because let's say you're on your couch.
Yeah.
You have it undocked, and then you have a cable running from that to the dock.
Right.
Then maybe you could do it that way. Well, but I guess you could do that right now. No, you couldn't, because if it were plugged in, then it would think it was docked, right?
I created an imaginary thing in my head.
That's not a bad idea. Because it wasn't a totally bad idea.
I was like, what if there was like some sort of transmitter that plugged into your HDMI, and then you can go from there? But that's just the dock. And the thing is, when you take it off the dock, it just immediately goes to the handout anyway. So that idea is moot.
No, you're right. Stupid idea. We don't.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I was cooking there. But anyways, the second thing is we were curious about what the top and bottom USB-C ports are, because there's two of them. There's one on top, one on bottom. And I just don't know what that could be for. And
I don't know either.
And I hope they show us. What if it's like Game Boy, where it's like you connect two consoles together? With that, I don't know what really you do.
Wild. How about the new kickstand? That's a big upgrade. A serious kickstand with the Switch too. No more tiny.
Yeah. It is
dinky
cool.
Stand.
It is a cool kickstand for sure.
I don't know. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know. I do want to know more about. Yeah, I don't know. There's a whole lot more I want to know, and it's going to be revealed in November, I'm sure. I mean, in April. So
my wedding anniversary.
So we will. Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
It's not April 1st, is it?
No, it's April 2nd.
It is.
Both of our moms' birthdays though are April 1st.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, look at that. You're gonna have a wedding anniversary, and that's why Nintendo did it.
I have to.
We got this guy in Arizona.
Yeah.
His name's Richard De La Cruz. He hates us. Just kidding.
Hates everything we stand for, but loves us all the same.
Yeah. We're gonna put the reveal on his wedding anniversary. Okay. Moving on. We're gonna talk about this Schreier piece here, reporting PlayStation canceled 2 more live service games, one from Bend Studio and the other from Blue Point Game. A spokesperson told Bloomberg that the two games were canceled after a recent review. The good news is that neither studio will close. Okay, so like a year ago, not even a year, 6 months ago, Sony had like 100 live service games.
They sure did.
Ready to go. They were, as the great Bruce Arians once said, they had 6 rounds in the chamber, baby, and they're ready to fire. So it's like they were ready to go. Now all of a sudden, that's whittled down to like maybe 2 or 3. I don't know if you count Marathon in there.
What I imagined they were doing was they had their hand on Jim Ryan's back, leading him out the door, and was just like, no, those are still, we got those. Those are still happening. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Your legacy will continue. And then he walked out the door.
So, okay.
They said no.
So where does PlayStation go from here? I think I saw that one of the Schreier did not report this. I saw this floating around the internet, so I probably shouldn't repeat it. But because I didn't see it reported anywhere that I remember, but I think I saw that one of them was a God of War live.
Yes.
Is that correct?
God of War live service, yeah.
And that just doesn't make sense.
Makes no sense.
It's like you have this established single player IP that's doing really well, reinvented itself. We can talk about camera angles and stuff, but other than that, two of the previous games have been like incredible. And what they do next is going to be really exciting. It just doesn't make sense to try and jackhammer a live service title in there. So that seems like an idea that was bad from the start and probably should have never been taken up. We also know that Sony or PlayStation recommitted themselves to releasing it was like a first party single player title every year, which is their bread and butter. So I don't know. It's disappointing because when they announced this big shift where they were going to push live service and mobile gaming, it seemed doomed from the start because I don't know, you were going to throw a bunch of stuff at a wall and see if it's going to stick. And a lot of that stuff is stuff that, I don't know, it's how many people are interested in it. Could those resources not be better spent doing other cool things, trying to come up with other cool ideas? I feel like that's the better reason to make games. One thing I'm curious about is like Astrobot's success. I don't know. Astrobot's success is like, it's this little game made by a studio, I think of less than 100 people. And I assume it did well financially. I don't think it necessarily like, it didn't make like Horizon or Ghost or God of War numbers, but it did reasonably well. So it's like, does Sony not see that and go, hey, can we not do little things like this? Is there more creative things we can do in between our gigantic, AAA titles? I don't know. PlayStation's in a weird spot because they are at the front line of game budgets, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and rising game budgets. But they also have the tools to make like smaller stuff. So I don't know. It feels like of all three, there was a point in time when it was like PlayStation knows exactly what it's doing, Xbox is completely lost, and Nintendo's trying to figure itself out. And that is all completely flipped. Xbox is still kind of lost. PlayStation doesn't really know what it's doing.
Yeah.
Nintendo knows exactly what it's doing.
Right.
Which I think is just kind of funny. Your initial reaction. There's a little bit I want to read and pick at a bit, but yeah.
Right. It's disappointing. And I mean, I know I already made the joke about Jim Ryan. And I think that we all can, and maybe you could say I'm being too hard on him, but he was the only one at Sony who spoke about live service games, who spoke about the, I'm putting words in his mouth, not like the importance of live service games, but like the future, like that's what, we should rely on. And that's when we started getting reports that, I think he even said themselves that there were 10.
Yeah, there was 10 at one point.
There's 10 at one point, yeah.
Live service game. And one of the Naughty Dog, Last of Us one, that one's gone. There was a bunch of others.
And in his tenure, arguably the biggest one that people were at least interested in was canceled, which was the Last of Us factions. game. And then, of course, we had Concord, which we know how that went last year. And now we have these two, especially the most surprising and disappointing thing is both of these live service games being headed by two studios who are very specifically known for creating extraordinary remakes and very good single player titles. Mm-hmm. And what we assumed they were working on was was a very bad assumption, and they've been stuck on. Well, I say stuck. I'm using very harsh phrasing, but they were relegated to these live service games that nobody asked for.
No,
and are even if you just spend. Because we only know one of them was God of War 1. We don't know the other ones, right?
I haven't seen. People may have reported what the other one was. But
I can't tell you what the plot of the God of War 1 was. It's all just musings, of course, anecdotes. But in God of War focuses on one character only, Kratos, who is literally a god. Yeah. There is assumedly no one else. There is a very finite amount of individuals that can be played as or can even come close to doing what these incredible people can do in these games. So how could you create something to kind of revolve around that? And of course, it kind of just breaks the illusion. It breaks like the
Well, narratively, it doesn't fit the world something either, like Star Wars you can understand, because the big universe with like no rules almost, so there's all kinds of things you can do with a Star Wars MMO, and they've made them, and they've made Star Wars live service games. I think Battlefront, maybe you want to count that, but so that makes sense from a like IP standpoint. Not that I like the idea of like a live service Star Wars thing, but God of War, yes, you're correct, makes less sense. Mm-hmm. And Ben Studio, I don't know. I played through Days Gone, and at the end I got tired of it. Yeah. I just think it wore out its welcome a bit. But it was a game that if they announced a sequel, I would be excited for. I'd be like, okay, yeah, give it more iteration, give it another shot. What can you do here? Now, maybe in Sony's mind, it's like, well, if we did that, it would have a $350 million budget. And that's just not something we can fit. And so that's sort of part of the problem is, I don't know. It's like if you try and let these studios go off and do their own thing, how much of a budgetary issue is it going to be? And that gets back to, can we do smaller things? Mm-hmm. Can we use these studios to do things that are not trend chasing? Yeah. I want to read this piece from a little bit from the story from Jason Schreier. I just want to nitpick at the line. I like Jason Schreier's work, obviously, a whole lot, so this isn't like a criticism or anything. But Schreier writes, quote, "These games, the live service games, are risky ventures, but can be lucrative when they're successful. For Sony, the strategy has led to one hit in 2024's Helldivers 2 and several flops, including Concord, which was removed from sale less than 2 weeks after it released. So I think it's important to point out a distinction between Helldivers 2 and Concord, because Helldivers 2 is a game that plays, and you may not even know it has live service mechanics it's live in the sense that, yes, there's an ongoing war. But how do we define live service? We define it by monetization. That's when Strauss-Zelnick says live service, that's what he means. He doesn't mean the game gets updates, right? Yeah. Early access games to him are not live service games because, so anyway, that's the point. The point I'm making here is early access means monetization. Helldivers 2's monetization is not the same as something like Concord's or Overwatch's or Fortnite's or Call of Duty's, right? If anything, it's minuscule. You can almost play the game and almost not even know it's there in some respects.
Absolutely, yes.
So why was Helldivers 2 then successful? Because it's just a good co-op game with a cool premise, and it's intense, and it's third person, and it has fun combat. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but so the reasons that Helldivers 2 is successful has nothing to do with its status as a live service game. It has a bunch to do with things that Sony is already good at, which is having teams create good games, right?
Yes.
Why was Concord unsuccessful? Well, it was a saturated market, hero shooters. I think multiplayer games are harder to get into because you can't just play with friends. You have to learn rules, and then you're playing against other people, which means things are going to be more difficult because it's competitive. And then, it had a really generic design. It looked like a real quick cross between Guardians of the Galaxy and Destiny. It didn't look all that distinct. The trailer was obnoxiously generic. And then, that sort of set the tone for how people were excited for it. And that was something that was like, I think that put a bad taste in a bunch of people's mouths. So why did Concord fail? Well, for all those reasons, complex reasons. So it's like when we talk about live service games and ones that are successful and ones that aren't, I don't know. I think it's important to point out why like the distinction there, right? I put in my notes that Marvel Rivals is successful. So it's like, what's the Marvel Rivals is a multiplayer game. Well, I think Marvel Rivals has less work to do in the sense that it's an established brand, and it did release free to play on Steam. So it didn't have like an obnoxious, maybe it did, but it didn't have one from, and it didn't come from a studio and a company that everyone expects like good single player titles to come from. It came from what, NetEase was it?
NetEase, yeah.
Which
strangely enough was to its detriment, because NetEase is very, very much known apparently for predatory practices regarding regarding live service stuff. But go ahead.
So it's not a hard and fast rule. Things can work out in certain contexts, but I don't know. I just think it's, to repeat myself, I just think it's I don't know. It's useful to point out the distinctions there, because I don't know. Market researchers may see Helldivers 2 and Concord as the same thing, and they don't understand why one did good and one did it. Or they may see Concord and Marvel Rivals as the same thing, but I think there are distinctions there. I think there are market expectations to consider that make all those things different when we talk about sort of live service. Another good example would be Rocksteady, right? Rocksteady is a studio known for single player games.
Yes.
Maybe the single greatest like single player superhero game of all time. The second Batman one. I don't remember it.
City.
Arkham City. Spider-Man fans maybe disagree with me. That's fine. All I'm saying is single player game, right? As soon as Rocksteady said they were making a Suicide Squad game, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Live service. Immediately the mood in the room went down, and it was because live service, Suicide Squad, it's going to be a shooter, how's this going to work? From the start it was, I don't think this is going to work, and it didn't. And I think it's sort of in a similar vein of Concord. That may not be fair,
and the connotation now, because of how long live service games have been around, is here's our game Concord, it is a live service game. The sentiment with players, with gamers is, oh, you want my money. Like, because knowing that what's the catch? That sentiment is in gamers' heads already, and that already is a negative. Especially when it came to something like Suicide Squad. But even then, they're going to be trying again soon with Jade Raymond's game. Fair Games?
Yeah, I completely. Because she was working at Stadia.
She was working at Stadia, and they announced a new studio that Sony bought.
Yeah, that went down.
And then they showed that trailer, I think, at the Game Awards, not last year, the year before.
Jeez, I don't even remember.
Yeah, and it's just another shooter,
Yeah, and the thing is, people say, and Schreier is correct that live service games are risky ventures. I think every game is a risky venture, but partially with live service, because you can't just put it out and sell it. You have to put it out and then the work begins, which I think is too bad. But I don't know. Sometimes that miffs me a little, because it's like, who's really taking the risk there? Like, I don't know. Did Yves Guillemot take the risk for XDefiant, or did all the people that got laid off from Ubisoft San Francisco shut down? Didn't it? So I think it shut down.
One of them, yes, something shut down.
One of the Ubisoft studios shut down. So it's like, well, who really took the risk there? Did Yves take the risk, or Was it all the people? Because Yves still has a job.
Yes.
He's still the CEO, and his family owns Ubisoft. So it's like the risk for him was, I guess, having to answer tough questions from investors and maybe floating a private equity sale. But he didn't lose his job like people in San Francisco did.
No.
So it's just like, I don't know. When we talk about, and I want to make clear, Schreier is correct in the assessment that just companies are taking a risk. But I think when like executives talk about it, I wish they would stop to think about who's exactly is taking the risk.
Yeah.
Because it ain't fucking executives. Okay, so moving on here. This is another Schreier piece that I thought was really good. And I kind of just want to read about it because we're talking about game budgets and rising game budgets. And I thought this perspective was interesting, and maybe we could have a little discussion about it. Schreier was, I haven't played this yet.
Jason Schreier report.
Bought this like expensive thing, completely forgot to use it. Schreier is responding to a piece in the New York Times about rising game budgets, specifically about how visual fidelity has led to higher costs. Schreier says it's clearly true that game budgets are rising, but adds a little nuance to the issue. So he kind of outlines 3 factors: salaries, time spent making the games, and then mismanagement. And I'm just going to read a piece here from his story. Budgets for games are now enormous because those 2 factors, more people, more time, have grown so significantly over the last decade. Graphical fidelity is a part of that, to be sure. In general, you need more artists and engineers to make games look more detailed and photorealistic. But games also need more time and people because of growing scopes, as games embrace massive levels and sprawling, sometimes bloated, open worlds. And because most alarmingly, games are growing, and perhaps most alarmingly, games are going more expensive because of rampant mismanagement, because of companies chasing trends, making bad bets, and lacking a clear creative vision. Inefficient workflows, technological shifts, and insecure executives can all be a cause of wasted time, which equates to higher budgets. A common example these days is taking a team with years of experience making single-player games and pivoting them to a multiplayer game as a service, which he has linked, and I'm pretty sure that links to Suicide Squad, but it can link to a number of games there. So I don't know. I thought this was interesting, but my question still remains: is like, okay, but so yes, game budgets are rising, partially due to fidelity, and to power that fidelity, you have to hire a bunch of people, and then you have to contract studios to help out with that too. The credits to Indiana Jones and the Great Circle were the length of a Star Trek episode.
Yeah,
so it's just like they were like 45 minutes long, and a lot of that was studios from different places in the world contracted to do specific parts of the play or whatever, specific parts of the game, and then you have QA that is contracted from different places, which makes things complicated because I guess that's a cheaper way to pay for labor, but it's still expensive because of the mass amount of people that you're paying. So if you were to draw back the scope, does that then reduce your labor costs? I don't know. I hate saying that you should just hire fewer people because one of the biggest problems in the world right now is not that too many people have jobs and too many people have a way to buy food. Will never be a problem. But like I do feel, I think it's obviously true that games need to scale back somehow. And I think visual fidelity is one of the ways, and yeah, bloat is also one of the ways as well. A lot of the Assassin's Creed games did not need to be as big as they were.
Right.
I'm not sure Star Wars Outlaws needs to be as big as it is. So I think the industry is in a spot, I put this down, where sort of it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where everybody is building an expensive car because that's what they did last time. And last time before that, they also built an expensive car. But like no one has ever thought, maybe I should just spend less and make a less expensive car.
Yeah.
And see what happens. But this is self-fulfilling prophecy where everybody thinks the only good type of car is an expensive car. So that's the only type of car I can make.
Yeah.
Instead of like anything else. That's not true with the wider industry, but I think certain spots in AAA
Yeah.
it is true. And that's causing things to exponentially go up and inflate. And eventually it's going to, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to have to come down. It can't be that in 2 years we have $1 billion games are just a common thing. In 5 years, $1.5 billion, like that seems impossible for things just to keep getting more and more expensive. You look like you were gonna. Sorry, I talked for a long time.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna make a silly point that like just kind of slightly relates, but yeah, just due to obviously in the 80s when Nintendo hit it big, people were making money hand over fist, and sure, people wanted to make video games to make money. They were good video games, like early 2000s when capitalism was always big, but capitalism became a lot bigger in the early 2000s with the way marketing changed and the
Internet
focus. Yes, the internet and the focus on teens, early adults. Then by the late 2000s, video games kind of the introduction of microtransactions became what's the easiest way to make money.
Sure.
And so you can still make money in this industry, but I think that it has to change to a point to where people will need to make money for certain subsets of people. I'm going to try to use this as a not comparison, but an example, and it's I think it works, but it's not great. There's over 1,000 Pokemon that exist, right?
Okay.
Every Pokemon is someone's favorite Pokemon.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You can make a lot of different games. Someone is going to buy it. So we'll go back to Sony real quick. Take, not even Bend Studio or Bluepoint, take someone else. Make a quick Loco Roco game. Parappa the Rapper doesn't need a 2-year, development cycle and 300 people working on it. A short game featuring Daxter from Jack and Daxter doesn't need to be a big game, but these are games that people have been asking for, people want again, people yearn for. And with the smaller development costs, you would assume that those games provide, your returns would be bigger. But the way that capitalism has kind of changed our industries, it's the most amount of money right now, not the most amount of money in correlation to your growth and time.
Yeah, that's also part of the problem, specifically like with Xbox, is that Xbox is part of a company that is constantly looking to grow.
Yeah.
Right. So it's so right now I think Xbox is in a weird position because their most important thing is to grow.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to do everything they can, which includes putting exclusives on other consoles and putting Halo on Switch 2, or I don't know, doing whatever they can to grow the audience, even though is that going to lead to is that going to lead to a better Xbox? Is that going to lead to more profitable Xbox brand? I don't know. Yeah. So I think maybe that just this lust for growth by any means possible, I think is partially maybe leading them to that aimless sort of go anywhere phase that they're in right now. You mentioned something. Oh, sorry. So the mismanagement I think is harder to tackle because I don't know, because that happens everywhere. Mismanagement happens in all walks of life. So it's how do we stop that? I don't know, that I guess that just comes down to having good managers. And I guess that's a problem that is, but that's a problem that is in every industry. But one of the stories Schreier talked about was that a creative director played Breath of the Wild and came back with what he called great ideas with a capital G and capital I. So it's I don't know, when that happens, when something like that happens, where do the great ideas come from? Is it, I want to make a game like this? Or is it, this game sells, so we need to make it? So it's it's a form of trend chasing, right? Yeah. And I think trend chasing is a problem. And I think we've seen that games of all types can do well economically. So you just have to resist. I guess I don't know. I'm not a part of the industry, so I'm not going to be able to sit here and tell you how to manage a studio. Go watch Mark Dara's YouTube channel. But yeah, I just thought this was interesting because the industry has created a monster, both through the size of the games and the monetization of them, right?
Yeah.
I've talked about this with like EA is, you know, tomorrow if EA said we're going to stop FIFA Ultimate Packs because they're unethical, I'd be like, oh, great. But that money that comes from Ultimate Packs, that is like the lifeblood for a huge chunk of the industry and a lot of people's jobs. And not all those people are greedy, you know, gambling executives that came over from DraftKings to work at EA, you know. A lot of those people like that will just, you know, if EA decided to cut that off and their business shrunk overnight, it would hurt the normal artist working at Respawn or whatever, right? So it's like EA has created this monster, this global monster that is eating everything, and it needs to stop. But if it slows down, it's people like the consequences are I don't know, aren't going to be good for people who are innocent in that, and that sucks. And that's the fault of multiple people, but no one person specifically. And I think it's sort of the same thing with game budgets. Is game budgets have gotten to a point where it's like the industry has created these problems. We should still talk about how things need to scope down, because eventually the bow will break. Like, things cannot keep going up. There has been speculation about how much GTA 6 is, the budget for GTA 6 is.
Can't imagine.
But whenever we hear about it, and however many people are working on that game, at this point, it may be like, there may be the size of a small country working on GTA 6.
Yeah, just might be.
Probably not that much. Maybe a small town. But like, I don't know. I'll be curious when I play GTA 6. I'm sure it'll be amazing. But if it ends up having like a $500 million budget or something like that, I'm going to wonder, okay, did this need to have a $500 million budget? Or could GTA 6 be really good for a lot less money? I think that'll be an interesting question. And one that's really hard to diagnose. But I'd be willing to put money on the game not needing to be as expensive as it is. I don't know. So, and I base that just on the fact that, I don't know. I don't think games are successful because they have gigantic budgets. And so if games aren't successful because of their budget, then what are they successful for? And can we focus on those things and build on those things in a sustainable way? That doesn't mean that there can't be massive games, right? That doesn't mean we can't have Elder Scrolls 6 and it's going to be huge. That doesn't mean the ecosystem doesn't exist for that. But like, when I think about something like Star Wars Outlaws probably did not need to be as like sprawling and complex as it is.
Yeah.
It probably scaled down. You know, the most recent Before Shadows Assassin's Creed Mirage, I give props for the team for doing what they did, because they essentially remade the first Assassin's Creed. It didn't review really well, and I would agree, because there wasn't a whole lot to it. The game, the gameplay like plateaued 5 hours in, and it didn't get much more complex. So it's like, you know, somebody may hear me and go, okay, on one hand you're saying smaller games, on the other hand you're saying, you know, Assassin's Creed Mirage sucked. Seems like you're just contradicting yourself.
Right.
But I think that you can add things to that. You can do things with Mirage without making it huge and super expensive to make it more interesting. You can have better writing. Think of better dialogue, more deep characters. I don't know, something like that. And I think an example would be something like Astrobot, right? Astrobot is both fresh and sort of old at the same time. So I don't know. It's complicated, but the answer cannot be we're gonna ride this wave until things just fucking crash,
right?
And it go from there. Did you see the speculation about GTA 6 costing
$100.
Yeah. This industry analyst Matthew Ball, who I'm vaguely aware of, I've read some of his stuff. He writes like dissertation-sized like analyses of the games industry economics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he said that there are people in the industry that are kind of hoping that GTA 6 sets itself at like $80 or $90. And I don't know. I think that's a really interesting, a really fascinating question, because then it gets into it. What is it? What is the worth of a game? Is it economically feasible for them to price the game like that?
Right.
And even if it is, even if they do price GTA 6 at a nine, I don't know why I'm talking about this all of a sudden, but it's just somewhat related. If they do price GTA 6 at like $90, that doesn't mean that Ubisoft's next big game should be priced at $90. And that also doesn't mean that we shouldn't find a way to not price games at $90.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we shouldn't look to turn that the other direction. I understand inflation, but I don't know. Maybe combat inflation with lowering the scope of games rather than making things more expensive. I don't know. Something's got to give. It either can't go up anymore, or it's going to keep going up, and eventually it's going to explode. One of those things is going to happen. I don't know. But man, I think the reason I brought that up was I can just imagine Strauss Zelnick just smugly saying that it's $90 and everybody should just put up with it. And then me just being super annoyed at it. It would still sell a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would sell as well.
It would, but yeah, like there's literally no reason it should be sold at that point, or it needs to be sold at that point, because they have their own moneymaker, which is GTA Online.
Yeah, that's the other.
To which they're gonna make tenfold whatever they would have made just selling GTA.
Yeah,
as is.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about like $70 games is Madden is $70.
Yeah,
I'm not going to believe for a second that Madden needs to cost $70.
No.
I don't believe it.
Nope.
Madden could be free to play, and EA would be fine. Now, the reason, this is totally speculation, but the reason Madden is $70 is because it's the only NFL football game.
Yeah.
And so there's a captured casual audience that every few years will pay EA $70 and then spend money on microtransactions. There's that YouTuber who is famous for being super excited about Madden. I forget what his name is. He looks like an asshole. I don't know. Angry Joe made fun of him a few times. I don't remember the guy's name.
I don't. Yeah, I have no clue.
He's the guy that's like, "Woo, 1st and 10, false start, hell yeah, guys!" I don't know.
Jesus.
What's up, guy? I don't know. I'm making fun of the guy. He has like a really bad mustache, like me. Like, he just needs to get rid of it and honestly delete his channel and all that stuff. I'm big time now.
It's scratchy.
I'm calling out. No. But anyway, so it's like EA knows they can sort of rely on that, which is why they don't need to make it free to play. I think it's something similar for like Call of Duty, even though they did make Warzone free to play. They could probably make other aspects of Call of Duty free to play or restructure it somehow, but they could just keep releasing new ones, and they've got a captured casual audience. But anyway, sorry. Were you about to say something else?
No, I got nothing to add.
Okay. Are you ready for tidbits?
Yeah, I'll make it quick.
Okay.
What if I told you, in this world, there are bits, and there are tids, and Richard is the only man who can put them together into tidbits?
Film auteur David Lynch sadly passed away last week at the age of 78. Despite being a film director, the works that he has created over the years has influenced some of the biggest names in gaming, namely Sam Lake and Hideo Kojima. Beyond that, his reach has extended into games itself. Alan Wake, Deadly Premonition, Zelda Link's Awakening, Kentucky Route Zero, and Control are just some of the games where you can see his obvious influences. Rest in peace.
Did you ever watch Twin Peaks? All of Twin Peaks?
No, never got to watch that or Fire Walk with Me. Never got to watch it.
I've never seen Fire Walk with Me, but I would highly recommend Twin Peaks.
Yeah. Something Sarah Palmer.
It is basically, because it is basically you'll watch it and be like, oh, this is a TV show made by Remedy and directed by Sam Lake, right? Because it's like
pretty much, yeah.
And I've shown you scenes from like Mulholland Drive,
Right,
where it's like, no, I banned that, and then just cut to Control and the little puppets, and it's like strikingly similar, which is great. But anyway,
this could have been its own story, but I'll just throw it out there. Shuhei Yoshida's final day at Sony was also last week. He had some choice things to say throughout his tenure in a podcast with Kinda Funny Games. Shuhei Yoshida says that if he was still in charge of PlayStation first party, he would have tried to resist the PlayStation Live service push and joked that maybe that is why they removed him. I wonder if that's why they removed, what's his name too, before Jim Ryan, Sean Layden.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Maybe. He abruptly left.
That has always been kind of weird.
Yeah, he abruptly
left. It's a little like Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma. I feel like we never really got the real true reason.
He'll spill it one day.
We'll have him on the show. I'm gonna ask him out of the gate. I'm gonna call him wrong name because I always mispronounce it. I'm gonna go, Mr. Layden, Mr. Lyden.
Lon Shaden.
Lon Shaden, you tell me right now, why the hell did you leave PlayStation, and why were you kicked out by Jim Ryan after he said live service only? That's how we'll start.
That would have been a good one. He also gave his own reasons as to why the PlayStation Vita failed. Vita means life, by the way. The main reason, development resources were split and they didn't have enough studios to make games for two platforms. So they had to prioritize PS4 development. Why make the console? Other reasons, proprietary memory cards were a mistake, very big mistake. Back touchpad was not necessary and added cost. I agree. The OLED increased production costs. I also agree. And the Vita dev kit had a video out, which means you could plug it into the TV and play on the TV. But they removed it for the final version just to save a few cents. I don't think that had any bearing on why the Vita failed. But the first two, I think, were pretty big.
How much was the Vita at launch?
$250?
$250? I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's maybe just because at that point, I don't know.
It was $200, $199.99.
Okay, so it wasn't that bad.
The first trip up was when they announced the 3G version with AT&T, like and everybody I think that audible like groans in the audience when they announced that. The proprietary memory cards are a big hit because not only is it cumbersome to have a proprietary memory card that you can only use on that device, they were expensive. They were incredibly expensive for very small space, which was unfortunate. The back touchpad not being necessary, I agree with, because besides Uncharted, Golden Abyss, I can't recall any game that really needed the back touchpad.
Yeah, that because remember with the PS3, which was, came out before the Vita, the idea was like the PS3 could do all these different things. Mm-hmm. Like there was like printer stuff you could do on the PS3.
Yeah,
wasn't there?
Yeah, there was Linux. You can install Linux on it.
Yeah, so it was like they had this there was a bunch of stuff going on.
It was going to be a multimedia machine. Basically.
So they kind of made an Xbox One before the Xbox One tried it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe some of that may have carried over to the Vita. And I never had a Vita, unfortunately.
I also think this is just my own personal thing, but I always think that they put a lot of faith into that Call of Duty Vita game, Black Ops Declassified.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was a launch. I think it was a launch Call of Duty Vita game, and it didn't end up being good. And Call of Duty was at its. I mean, Call of Duty's still very high, but it was like. Black Ops days, that was very, very high, and it didn't do so well. And when it didn't do well, Call of Duty not doing well, handheld, I think everybody kind of looked at that and went,
"Yeah,
we're not going to put our chips in this basket."
I wonder if the environment today is not better for a handheld than it was in the early 2010s. Because the early 2010s, we still didn't have like apps. We're still like everybody was kind of figuring out apps on phones,
Yeah.
It was a little bit more of a Wild West. Now that's kind of figured out.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have apps on our TVs and stuff. So it's like if you were to do a handheld device that's cheaper, you wouldn't have to worry about, because the PSP had like PSP movies.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
You wouldn't have to worry about having like people distribute physical copies of movies made specifically for the PSP, because there's going to be digital and streaming on your handheld, I would assume. So it's like a whole
those
new
were
world.
available. Those were available.
So I wonder if like the environment now is not, and when I say handheld, like obviously yes with the PC handheld market, but that's different because it's like PC handheld. You can do much more with it.
I think
the scope of like a Vita is a much smaller scope.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like it's not going to be something that you can hook up to you can actually do computer stuff on, if they were to do something like that. Anyway,
I do think the handheld environment is in a really sweet spot right now for all the wrong reasons. The biggest of which being ADHD. People love to have Netflix on with their stream and then like it just playing something because they need all that auditory
yeah, and there
visual
are
stuff.
more games today that are suited for handheld than
Absolutely.
maybe even than back then. One, with how Steam has become popularized, but so now it's like you have a marketplace where smaller games thrive a lot of the time. Doesn't mean it's not hard to make games. It is, but like just think of the past few years. Hades, Balatro, Vampire Survivors, Stardew Valley. Like there's we could both go on Steam right now, and I'm sure we could each find 50 games that are like perfect for handheld stuff. And that's all in the PlayStation Store as well. So it's like if they had sort of, and I guess they have the portable, but again, it's not the only console thing. I don't know. The economics are weird, and I don't know, because then it's like, well, do you really want to have to build a whole new handheld console thing? Because you already have the portable, and you're doing fine. And it's like, do you want? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a whole thing, and also customability.
Yeah,
a lot of people love to customize their handheld. It's a
Do you think maybe back then it was just Nintendo had a handheld, and it was popular, and they had this dual market where they had their console and their handheld. So we're going to do it too, because it's like the popular thing to do. And so that was a drive, because there was a market for it, because people did buy a console and then did buy the handheld.
It was also neat because you had a lot of weird games because and that's something that you can attest to recently of once again going through the Splinter Cell saga. It's just like, oh, this Splinter Cell Double Agent is way different than the console Splinter Cell Double Agent. Force Unleashed on handheld, way different than the console Force Unleashed.
I didn't know that.
For Star Wars, yeah.
Okay.
And you had just a bunch of it was weird but also unique, strangely unique as well.
And cheaper, I would assume, too.
Yeah, lots of license-based games. Like, you do get the consequences of like shovelware and license-based games and stuff. But even then, like, I know on GBA the license-based version of Lord of the Rings: Two Towers is pretty solid. Lilo and Stitch is a really good side-scroller shooter for some reason.
Is there? Did someone write like a gigantic dry book about this, about the economics of handhelds? Somewhere in a university library, some guy wrote the economics of handheld video games between 2000 and 2013, and it's just graph bars and long paragraphs about market data that I want to find and read. But
that'd be a hefty book, I'll tell you.
Anyway, sorry. Derailed your tidbits. I apologize.
No, that's okay. That was all. That was it for tidbits.
Oh, okay. Right. We're almost at an hour and a half. Is there anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I'm all good.
Follow us, youtube.com/gaming discourse, patreon.com/thegaming discourse, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.